Thanks everyone for joining in. And yeah, today we'll be looking into error handling. And basically, all I have is a demo file, so there's not any slides. It's I guess we can say hands-on, but the content is fairly straightforward, I believe. So I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to share a little bit about kind of where I started from, what got me there, and how I went into or went about revisiting how I'm handling errors, and if anyone wants to chime in and share how they feel about error handling in their own day-to-day stuff, or how they feel about error handling in what will be shown on screen, feel free to interrupt at any time. And yeah, I just want this to be as open of a discussion as possible. I think there's a lot of great folks with us today, and I'm curious to see what they have to say on a topic like this one. So here we go. I'll be sharing my screen, and with that, the first thing I'll say is that the demo file I'm using today is something that is available online. You can get that from my website. So if you go to, say, accolade+accolade.com/downloads, you get some files over here, and not surprisingly, the one that says error handling is the one you want to be looking at. And yeah, so basically, I had been doing some error handling, not necessarily the best all the time. And then I came across a couple of other things, and some of which I felt like were good to be using in my day-to-day work. Some of which I felt like, well, that was maybe a little too much. You know, that I've seen some people say, yeah, I'm having this set of custom functions to handle errors. It's just you know, a few of them, like 25, and I'd be like, well, I think that's not for me. You know, perhaps it works well for them, and I'm not gonna challenge that. There's more than one way to do things, but I felt like having something that would be lighter on the custom functions would be something that matters for people to want to use this, and for myself in the code. I feel like I don't want to have to decipher when to use what, and so on and so on. So yeah, I would say something else that I came across was the Carbon framework, especially with transaction, where everything was packaged into scripts that were using the single pass loop pattern. So that's something we're going to discuss a little bit about today. It's not something that is brand new, far from it. If I bring back the web browser that I had on screen a second ago, we can see a blog post from Salient dating back to 2012 about this. So basically, the pattern that the single pass loop is trying to address is one where, you know, you have your script where you do some stuff, and then you capture an error, you load that into an error variable, and then you test against that variable to do your error handling, okay, whatever cleanup you need to do. But the thing is, say you pass the test, you keep doing other things, and then like the pattern repeats itself, and you end up having like more cleanup codes than you have actual process code. So the single pass loop is really something where the loop construct from FileMaker is being used to handle the flow And if an error happens, you still get the error in a variable. You still do a test, but the test is simply exit loop if, and then all of your error handling is done at the tail end of your script before exiting. Okay, so that's what it boils down to. So something that's been around for a good decade, and that was one of the things that I said, okay, let's make sure that the scripting relies on this. Although the things that we're going to cover today, if you yourself are not using the single pass loop or don't feel like using it, it's not mandatory. You can use everything we're going to talk about today in without the single pass loop pattern. All right. So the file we're talking about has a set of custom functions. There's really just a few of them. We're going to look at them very briefly. The demo file has a text description for them, but we're going to open the custom functions and look at them. And then we're going to look at some scripts samples that are very bare bones scripts, just so that the features are there for us to see, but there's nothing else happening in there. It's not an attempt at being a solution demo file. It's an attempt at just showcasing possible patterns where you would want to handle your errors. Okay, and the other thing I would say is that this file is not meant as a demo about error logging, although error trapping is going to be the first thing you need to do well to be sure that you end up having a good log if you intend to build one. But we're not going to be discussing best practices about error logging per se. All right. So in here, if we look at our custom functions, we have just a few of them, okay? And the ones you really need would be error custom, error last, and is error. And that's it. The rest that you're going to call in your script is going to be dependent on the patterns you want to implement or not. So error custom if is really something that you may not ever need if you so choose. JSON get value type is something that is used by error custom, so you're not going to call it, but it's used to determine the type of a variable, if it's JSON or if it's text. And if you were to determine that by convention you're always going to use JSON or always going to use text for the content of a given variable, then you could even do away with this and not need this. So null is also not relevant. But yeah, the last one, script result is unavailable, is something that is part of the error handling set. So let's first look at error custom. So error custom is simply trying to take an error code and some text, okay, and wrap that into a JSON object, okay? So just so we have an understanding of what it spits out before we do anything with the custom function, I'm just going to bring the data viewer open and say, okay, let's call that to see what it gives us. Okay, it returns a number. So if I say error custom for my error code, okay, let it be 100 or 1 or whatever I need it to be, and then some text. Okay, it just does this. Okay, but it raises an error variable within the custom function that then gives me a JSON for the error. So I'm going to have the code, I'm going to have the text that I wrote, and coming along for the ride, a bunch of other information that you get to tune in the custom function to say, okay, this is the stuff I want to have or not have when I'm looking at my errors. So basically, our error content is really just JSON. Okay. But the functions themselves, all they return is the error code, just like the native function for get last error. Okay, it's giving us back a number. So again, looking at the content of the custom function itself. So we take the error code, we take the optional text, and then we start building the JSON. Okay, so our error code is pretty much going to be whatever is coming in. And then we say, okay, well, if it's empty, then let's just keep it for JSON. And if it's not empty, then if we have some error text, then we build it into the JSON. We add the information for script name, step name, line number, and detail. So that's the new stuff that came from 19.6.1. And that was a great motivation for me to revisit the error handling, because basically when I was doing debug, I used to be like stepping through my scripts a whole lot, trying to see where would the error happen. And I was getting to the point where I would sometimes try to put into my my errors things that would be like chunk of text that would let me know, oh, this is from this line or things like that. But really getting the line number from last error was really something that was game changing for me, and I would say, okay, well, then I can just run my whole script, see where it errors out, and then get the line number, and then get back to the script and say, oh, this is where the error happened. Let me either fix something about the script or understand why the error happened, and then what to fix about the perhaps the payload that I was sending into the script itself. So, and these informations are things that we're only getting if there is a last error, because if there is not, we can't retrieve a line number, we can't retrieve the other information. Okay. So, and then we keep building the JSON with just about anything we feel like adding. So you can add anything that's a get function in there. If you want to comment some, you're free to comment anything that you're like, okay, I don't really care about this one thing. You can add more things in there. And there is also, like I said, this variable that gets taken along for the ride. So if this is declared in your script prior to the function being called, it will get wrapped into the JSON, and then you're going to have some more contextual data. Okay.
Robert, I have a question.
Yes.
You said this is only for 19.6. Is that correct?
Well, basically, the things that we are getting for the get last error location,
yeah.
Okay, this is coming from 19.6. So if you want to do something that is relying on those functions to get the line number where the error happened back, you need to have that version. If you're running something that's earlier, like 18,
is there some sort of test in there that checks to make sure that version is being used, or
not in the custom function?
okay.
I guess the only test is that the file is meant to open only with 19.6.1 and above.
Okay, so, cool. Thank you.
Yeah, which is the file option.
Yeah, thank you.
But someone could technically say, okay, I'm going to repurpose that and use it in FileMaker 18, and just rip apart the portion that is meant to retrieve the line number and things like that, because those functions are not there, and I didn't try to run it in 18, but my guess is that stuff here would error out. But because we're asking for things as JSON string and JSON numbers, we would still get a JSON payload in the end. It's just like the data would not be accurate,
You could use evaluate function to deploy a feature that doesn't exist. Like if you're deploying to a client base where there's some 18s in there, you could use the evaluate function and the code would compile. And then when the upgrade happens in the passage of time, it'll still work.
Yes. Yes. So you have options if you're trying to get the function to play friendly with you across the bridge where the function didn't exist. But I would just edit the function altogether. But you can use evaluate if you feel like
it.
And
you could clean it up later. It's like if you can't lock them down on the version because it's a bit Wild West out there sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely.
You drop in the code, and then later on you just lock them.
There's times where there's times where some custom functions would quite literally have a fork with a version number because like the function had changed name from one version to the next. So yeah, there's a bunch of things there that can be applied to this like other custom functions. So yeah, and maybe you're asking here why I'm adding a UUID that gets generated on the fly. Again, it's like if you are using the error and you are logging it somewhere, well, if you want to retrieve the information about the error, instead of saying, oh, is it the 205 error that happened on Tuesday at 5 p.m., whatever, like you can just say, okay, I know it's this error. You get the ID, and then if you need to retrieve it from the log or anything, you have a unique identifier for that. So in the end, we use JSON format elements on the script error variable, just because we end up reading it somewhat often. So you don't have to format the JSON, but I would recommend keeping it there. But what gets outputted is really just the error code, like we saw in the data viewer. Any questions about this? All good. So if we need to come back, we can always do that. So I'm going to jump to error last, okay, because this one is a very simple one. Error last is simply calling error custom, where the error code is the get last error, okay, and then it carries over the optional text that we send in. So if we look at is error, this is what we're going to be using to test if a given payload is an error or not. And in this custom function, the choice was to say, okay, if we are receiving nothing at all, we are not going to consider it as an error. So if it's empty, we say it's not an error. Some people would say that should be an error. If that's the universe that you're in, you can come in here and change that false to true and keep going, okay? Other than that, we're just saying, okay, well, if we have a code that is strictly a number and a number without any decimals, then we take that and we return it as a Boolean. And then after that, we're saying, okay, well, it looks like we may be having JSON. If we have JSON, let's check for what's the error code that we have. If we do have one, then we get the Boolean. If we don't have one, then we try to retrieve what's in there. If it's a if it's sent as text or something else. And in all other cases, we say, well, it looks like what we're dealing with must be an error. Okay. So I'll start with just that, and we'll come back here as we need, and we'll get into the scripting. So this is a sample script. And in the demo file, you have two folders. One that shows the samples that involve the single pass loop. And each of those cases are also shown if you have scripting that does not involve a single pass loop. So today we're just going to look at the ones that are using the single pass loop. But like I said, the set of custom functions that we have here don't really care if you are using the single pass loop or not. So you just look at what is relevant for you. So in here, the first thing that we check is if there was an error that pre-existed our script, okay? Because if that's the case, we want to know about it and not run anything that that this is about to do. Because if we do anything here, it's most likely going to write over the last error, and we need that information. We're going to see later in the demo how that matters, especially with triggers. Okay. So this here is simply to capture the user abort states and error capture states. And then we have something here that is going to error out. Okay, so this always fails. Go to object where the object name is generated on the fly with a UUID. So it's impossible for me to have on my layout already something that that has what's in here. So then we say, okay, exit loop if with error last, and then I just say, okay, object does not exist. Okay, and if the object was to exist, if so, this is really the portion where you have your code that does stuff, you know, and you test for it. So if that was to succeed, then you keep going through, and then you exit the loop, you restore the abort state and error capture, and you just get out with either an error result or the actual result. Okay. So if I just do a quick debug for this, we get in. Too quick on my keyboard, and as we get to this here, we see that there's the last error. Okay. So at this point, nothing happened yet. If I was to bring over the data viewer and look for error, there's nothing in here. Okay. But as I step over this, error last was raised, and now if I bring again the data viewer, now we see that error has the content with the code and with the information that I find valuable about, like, what's the line number, what's the script name, what's the step name. Okay, so that's it. And from there, you can determine what to do with the error. Are you going to just send it up to any calling script? Are you going to try to log something? Are you going to try to ask the user for input? Are you, like, the options are in your hands at that point. You know, we're not trying to determine what to do. We're just trying to say, okay, well, we have a pattern where something happened. We're having a call that is very streamlined. Okay, where we're not trying to say set variable error to this and then check against and all of those things. We're just trying to keep our script in terms of readability to something where we can keep reading and not be interrupted too much by everything that needs to happen when an error is detected. Okay. So that was our first pattern. Like I said, one of the features or functions of the custom function is that if you are injecting, so to speak, the variable error context data with anything, let it be JSON or let it be text, that information is going to be part of the JSON you get for your error. Okay, so if you say, hey, I'm running things in a loop, and I want to know at not just at what line in the script it's erroring out, I want to know like what's my iteration of the loop where it fails. Is it failing at iteration number 5 or further at 25? Well, something like this would let you inject contextual data to the error to say, okay, well, knowing the line number is good, but I need to know a bit more. So I'll just run through the examples. If there are some where you want me to run them with the debugger on, we can do so, no problem. So this is another example where I'm using the same variable, but instead of putting in a complete JSON payload, I'm just writing straight text. Okay, so sometimes it's just simpler depending on what you need to inject. So this here is an example where we're not going to be dealing with a native last error. Okay, for instance, we have a show custom dialog, and when asking the user something, we want to know if they canceled, and if they canceled, we want to basically get out of there. Okay, so here we get the same thing. We're gonna, let's see if I run this with the debugger. So we get to our show custom, we say cancel, get last error, error custom. Over here, I'm gonna bring my data viewer. We see that the error was raised. Now the distinction here is because the error is not something that involves the last error. Okay, then in the code, I can get my script name. Okay, but I'm not going to get a line number. I'm not going to get a step name. Okay, because those are really exclusive to the last error. So I would very much like if FileMaker was giving us some get function that would let us retrieve the line number for the current running step, but it seems we don't have that. So we are exiting with the error in this case. And since we don't have something that let us deal with the line number, or actually, yeah, so before I get to forcing the line number, I can look at error custom if. Okay, so sometimes, so we want to handle the same type of error, just in a different fashion. Okay, because here there's an if statement, an exit loop, and then the end if. So it's a bit verbose. Okay, so we could say, okay, I'm going to do something like this, where I just say show custom dialog, and then exit loop if error custom, and then error custom expects an error code and a text, and the error code is itself wrapped in an if statement. Okay, so that you can do without any new custom functions. Same thing if we go to this other version of the same thing, you can say exit loop if, okay, and then test for your thing, and then if the test succeeds, or if the test fails, depending on how you see it, because we're talking about errors, then you call in the error custom that you want to raise. Okay, so it's just, to me, when I'm reading it, just exit loop if there's something that just feels a bit awkward. Same thing here when I'm reading this, exit loop if, error custom if. It's a bit hard to read or harder than what I'd like. So what I end up using is something like this, where I say exit loop if, error custom if, and then there's the condition, the error code, and the error message that I want to send along. Okay, but all three of those will do the same thing for you every day of the week. It's just a different way to write it out, basically. So, but this one is another custom function. So at that point, if you want to use this, you need, like we went, we looked at the custom functions we had. So I said, you really need this one, you really need this one, you really need the is error and then the script results. This one is optional, so it's not overly complex. You know, we say, okay, there is a test. If the test is met, then we call the error custom for the two parameters that we're getting. If the test is not met, we simply get out. So now trying to force getting an error number back, not just an error number, but a line number back. We have something like this here, okay, where we're going to show the custom dialog. So this by itself, even if the user cancels, is not giving us a last error, because the cancellation on this is just like this other button, you know. It's not like the cancellation button that we have in the import dialog, say, or something like that, where when the user presses that, we do get an actual last error. So here, if we say something like this, then you can add one more step that you know is going to fail, okay? And after that, call for error custom. And what this does is it's going to merge together the information from the last error with the information from the custom error. And you're going to get an error that looks like this. So I'm going to cancel here. We say go to object like this. It gives us error 116. And then if I say exit loop if with the error custom, once the error custom function is called, we do get a payload for error. And if I look in here, I'm going to see that, okay, it failed. My custom text is over here with user cancellation. And if I look at the line numbers, because I tripped the native last error, then I get a line number, a script number, and a step name. That gives me an idea for some proximity, you know, to what we have here. And so you can spend some time into looking at what fake error you're going to want to use to raise the error here. So what I like about go to object is that it's pretty simple. If you double click on here, you can write straight in here and just get out of here. You don't need like a bunch of nested windows and dialogues. But perhaps like the error number that it throws back is not the best, and perhaps like saying, okay, it's doing a go to object. Maybe you have something else where you want to be distinguishing between go to object and anything. So you can quite literally go through all of the steps and see, okay, how would you make this step fail in a way that it gives you something that you want. I think I'm just going to mention one more. It is the set field by name. So if we say set field by name, and for the target field, not for the repetition, we do something where there's a division by 0, okay? Well, then in that case, the error that this throws back is something different. It's 15 can't divide by 0. So again, up to you to choose, like if you want to have something like this, layout object is missing, or something of a different nature, and then maybe there's other steps that will give you a different output. But all in all, I would say aim for something that you're going to be able to distinguish when it gets into your logs from like traditional or real last errors, and also get something that when you're putting the step in, there's not a lot of work to make it fail. And the other thing I would say is right now I brought open the debugger and I went straight to those lines, skipping over the error capture. And when those two fail, they are not bringing any prompts or dialogues to the user. Okay, so keep those things in mind. If you have something that fails and that gives you an error number that is very exclusive, that is going to be easy to spot in your logs, then great. But if it prompts the user for something on screen, then maybe that's not what you want. All right. So any questions or comments with what we've got until now?
I kind of have one. Do you actually, this is Josh, by the way, do you actually use the that technique that you're displaying here where you sort of, quote unquote, to use your word, force the line number into the log? Or do you just find yourself, in when you're using this in production, for example, kind of relying on a descriptive string to identify the location in the script? I'm just wondering your personal preference.
In terms of personal preference, I very much like having something that's a line number. If I was able to get a line number for every single thing, that's what I want to rely on. So, of course, I can always add some additional context to it, but I think the line number is the quote unquote standard that I'd like to have. So as much as I can, when I know something failed for like business logic purposes that have nothing to do with the code execution, if I can just spend the extra bit to put this in, I'll try to do that. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, definitely. I actually had one more question about these business logic errors that you're talking about.
Yes.
Do you have any sort of advice or personal preferences on what type of, or what error codes to use for this type of validation, business logic, app level errors that don't have a corresponding necessarily FileMaker error code? I think Carbon or Proofgeist might use like negative numbers, and I'm just wondering what you've kind of found as a best practice.
Yes. So as you said, and like in the beginning, I was talking about stuff that I picked from Carbon, and in Carbon we see a lot of the custom errors being set to -2, and I kind of stuck to that, like -2 being a sort of business logic catch-all for the stuff that don't fit elsewhere. I know some people like to come up with very elaborate numbering scheme for the range. Over here, when we're talking about a cancellation, you know, there is a match for a native number to that in the list of FileMaker error codes. So when I can, I match those things. But more often than not, when we're talking about things that are really business logic, saying, hey, this is a field that should be mandatory and it's not there, and things like that, I don't see a ton of value to distinguish the error by codes. To me, it's more just the fact that the error is there and that it gets logged, and that the script flow handles the error gracefully.
it looks like that since all the error codes are whole numbers, you've got a whole space inside of decimals that you could use too.
Yeah, I wouldn't be going with decimals, just because again, there's a whole spectrum on the negative end that we'd be able to use. On the positive side of the numbers, I would really try to stick as closely as possible to the error codes that FileMaker are using, unless like you add another layer to say, okay, this is not a native error code and it is my custom error code, and then you know at that point that you need to refer to a different table or index to interpret the code itself. But yeah, that in itself is a topic that we can spend some time on, and I do understand that there's people where to them, not just knowing, okay, there is an error and so on and so on, but more, okay, what was the error and what's the frequency of it? And like, as soon as you need to do more of an analysis of what gets into your logs, then yes, those things are really things that you want to be spending time thinking about. It's just, it's very hard to anticipate all the different nuances you can get, especially with business logic, because there's so many different possible things that may come up. And the other thing is, as you are coding, you need to have that somewhat memorized. It's not like if you need to have the table by your side, so okay, what number should I output? It's gonna slow you down significantly. So I think if you get there, kudos to you for putting all of this in. But I think there's a lot of effort to put in to get that. So if you're after that, make sure that the benefits are there on the tail end, because otherwise it will be overly taxing for what you have to do the rest of the time. Does that answer the question, Josh?
Yeah, definitely. For sure. Actually, I have kind of one follow-up then, and this you
Good.
might have sort of already answered this, because I think you're kind of talking philosophy at this point, and being kind of reasonable about how detailed you get. Don't prematurely make it more complicated than it needs to be. But what about things like that do have their own error codes, but they correspond to external systems? Like, for example, if a base element's call returns a number because of some sort of syscall that failed, or it failed to create a file or something like that, that might overlap with a FileMaker error. So would you, in your case, translate that to just a -2 and then append that actual error code that you received back to the entire error object with using that context variable that you used? Is that how you might handle something like that?
Yes, that's really how I would deal with it. I would, in terms of error number, I would just do something like we saw here. It's just, it wouldn't be it would be error last like we see here. It would be more something like error custom, and then it would have its own, sorry about that, something like that. But making sure that before I call this, I do have this here that does contain the error number that the plugin gives me.
Awesome. Thanks.
Very
Makes
good.
sense.
So this brings us into what we might want to look in when we're calling subscripts. Okay, so the first thing that might happen when we're calling a subscript in terms of error is if it's deleted. So I don't recall that we looked carefully at the at that custom function. So let's go have a look at the function, and then we'll get back into the scripting. So is the script result unavailable? Okay. Basically, we start with an error code that is coming from error last, and we're checking for what's our script result. And script result is something that in itself is a bit funny, because you would think that you always get the script result from the last thing you ran, but if it didn't run, then your script result could very well contain a script result from a previous script that you called. So that's something to be mindful about. So, and then we're simply checking, okay, is that script result something that is valid JSON? And then we are trying to build an error. So we say, if we have an error code, then let's preserve the error as it is in $error. If that's not the case, but the JSON is not valid, then we raise an error. And in all other cases, we preserve the error. And then after that is done, we assign the error, saying, okay, well, if what was in there is an error, then it is preserved. If it is not, I'm sorry, if the result itself is an error, let it be a JSON or let it be a straight up number, because the custom function here interprets numbers as an error as long as they're not zeros. Then we pass the result as an error, and in all of the cases, error is preserved. So both error and result get raised by this custom function. And as far as result goes, so if the JSON is invalid, I'm sorry, if the JSON is valid, we return the result, and otherwise we return error. And then the actual output is simply a Boolean, okay, because again, we want to be doing tests against that. So we're saying, okay, is there an error code? Is the JSON invalid, and is the $error an error? So for any of those cases, we want to say, okay, let's consider that the script result is not available to us, and otherwise it will be available to us. So what this gives us is something where for each of our perform script, we're going to see immediately after something that says exit loop if script result is unavailable, okay? And that will let us deal with cases where if the script has been deleted, if the script returns invalid JSON, okay? So here we have a script that simply does not output JSON, or a script that returns an error. So this here is a script that builds an error and returns just that. And sorry, I'm just lost in between my tabs. Yeah, so, and once you get it back, you're not forced to exit right away. If you say, well, before I exit out, I want to do some tests, you can still say, okay, well, if the result is not available, let's check for what error code we get. And then, you know, if the code is whatever it is, then do X. And if it's something else, then do Y. And in all other cases, do Z. So so you've got options depending on what you're dealing with. Okay. So two other things that I want to show before I start talking about the examples we have for triggers is you can use the error custom functions with custom functions themselves. Okay, so here we have a custom function that is called isSquare. Okay, and we're going to test, is my number a square or not? So basically, if we have a quick look at the isSquare custom function, we're going to see in here that it's doing a very simple test, okay, to see if the number is square. And I really hope that I got this right. If I got this wrong, it doesn't matter much, because it's really the concept of the thing here that that you need to have in place to say, okay, well, we're going to test for something, and if it's good, then we're good. But if it's not good, if it's something that is false and we consider in some way an error, then you can output the error and call the custom function within something that's going to strip away the error code that it returns, so that it's not part of your output of the function itself, but that it still is going to raise up the $error JSON payload that you want to have in your variable. So here we say, okay, we have a custom error, and the custom error is that this thing is just not a square. Okay. Again, for something like this, perhaps you'd want to say we're going to have a different numbering and things like that. Up to you. So what this gives us is something where now we can just run our script and do our tests and say, okay, I'm having 9. Is 9 a square? It looks like it is. Okay. And if I look for my error is empty right now. Okay, because the criteria was not met. But if I do the same thing here, just by calling the function, okay, now the data viewer is showing, oh, we had an error. What's the error? Well, it's -2 and all of this. Okay. Again, there's no native last error, so we can't get a script line number or things like that, but you can still get a decent amount of things in here, and we still have our text here that says this is not a square. So there we go, and we exit out without meeting the result part of our script. So this will exit out in the error portion of our exit. So in the same fashion that we did this, and because this function is really expecting a Boolean return, we can even take this a step further and say, I'm just going to check for exit loop if not is a square. Okay, if you're not trying to load that into a variable or anything, you just want to know, okay, I'm using it to validate the input, then you can use it this way. Okay, and this is because the function is returning something that is Boolean. If it was a function that would concatenate text together, you wouldn't be able to use it for a test like this. You would be forced to use it in this way. But when you're having a custom function that is a Boolean, you can trim things down one step further. All right. Any questions or comments about using the custom functions within custom functions? All right. So we'll do one more thing, and it involves script triggers, because you saw that at the beginning of the script, the first thing I do is checking for last error, and it may sound counterintuitive, or what is it for? So we're going to see two samples, one where the triggers fire and the last error ends up being overwritten, and as a result, we're not in a good space, and we're going to see the same thing, but with our scripting that handles the error, I'm going to say the right way, or in a better way at least. So let's just look at the script that we have for this thing here. Basically, we're going to say do not find plus trigger. Okay, so what happens in here is that we're having a very basic scripting structure. Okay, we enter find mode, we set a field for a primary key to get to UID, and again, that's impossible for me to already have a record in my database that has that key in a record. So as we do perform find, we would expect this to just say, okay, something happened and exit here. Okay. But the thing is, and maybe as I'm writing this script, I don't even know there's a trigger on the layout. Okay. And we're going to see what happens with all of that. So I'm just stepping through. Okay. I do the perform find. Now I have here something that does on mode enter. Okay. Where someone perhaps said, hey, you know what? Every time the user will find records, we're going to sort the records. Okay, so they do this, and oh, the last error that I got just disappeared. Okay, and then they keep going. They sort the records, they exit out, and now I'm over here and I'm testing for error last. Well, error last has been wiped out. So I don't get to see a message that tells me something bad happened. Okay, so we had this for something somewhat benign, but this very thing could happen in a setup where whatever happens here needs, like, you need your error trapping to work and not fail on you. So again, if we just say, let's revisit that with something that checks for the last error. So if we say debugger on, and then we test. So it's the exact same script being called, okay? But then the script that is being triggered says, okay, first thing, let's see if there was an error. And indeed there was one. So we straight up exit from here, okay? And every step that I'm coming across, there are steps that are of the control category or the control group. Like in your, when you're building your script, you have like navigation steps and set fields and whatnot, but there's steps that are in the control group, and the steps that control your script flow, they won't alter the last error as you go through the steps. So this way, we're back in here. We still have a last error 401, and then we can say, okay, our error trapping happens the way we want it to happen. So that's it, folks. It covers everything, all the use cases that I wanted to show. So I don't know if you'll find that in there, there's patterns that happen in your own code. There's things that you would find useful. There are things that you'd like to say, maybe I'd like some of this, or maybe I'd like to tailor it to my own use case, but I'd like to just, you know, have this be an opportunity to revisit how we've been doing things, and to again open up the discussion to anything that maybe you're doing today, or that that you'd want to be doing, but you may not be having, or anything like that. So I'll stop sharing my screen unless there's some questions that want ask for me to get back into the demo file. Okay.
Hey, Robert, I got a question.
Yes.
A script called as a subscript could be deleted.
Mm-hmm.
And you might opt to say like, well, make the developer shouldn't break code. The other possibility that's within the realm of possibility is that somebody has a multi-file solution and one of the files has a script that's supposed to be called, but the privileges aren't set up properly.
Yes. Or the
And
file is down.
yeah, so at least 3 different things that can go wrong. And in that particular case, because we don't trap for everything because we're pretty pragmatic here, or we're always moving fast like New Yorkers. The if a script is gone for any of those 3 reasons, and the following line you say get, what the heck happened, it returns an error. Say like, hey, the line where you tried to perform a script, it returns an error for a broken script, and also for a missing script returns the same error. Like, what the heck?
Yes. So basically, the custom function that is checking for is the script result available. Like we saw, one of the first thing it's checking is to say, do I have a last error? Okay, and pretty much in all the cases that you described, natively, FileMaker is going to give you an error for those. And basically, even like if you were not going to get an error, there's no way that your custom functions could like force create one for you on the fly. You just wouldn't know that you have to create an error if
So I
given.
guess what I'm asking, custom functions aside, and I could test this if I want to be lazy, but as long as we're talking about it, the custom functions aside, if you have a line in a script that says perform script, and the script is missing for any of the 3 reasons we spoke about, and immediately after that line, you just, let's say it's no custom function, you just say get error, it will return an error.
By that you mean the native last error?
Yeah,
I would bet that it
error.
does, and if it doesn't, then you need to be speaking with engineering from Claris.
Anyway, I thought that
I would
was
file that as a
interesting
bug
because
big time.
we usually deploy in such a way that we don't break the code, but I thought that was particularly interesting in my notes. I'll mention one thing that's a little bit off topic, but I think it's potentially interesting. The set error capture on and off, and allow user board on and off. I think that's interesting, and I'm curious what other people think, you and anyone else. I move towards a coding pattern of balancing them because the state of the error capture and the state of the user board are passed from script to script. I got into the habit of having an equal number of on and off in a given script so that you could look at an individual script without having to know what the calling scripts are doing, just as a simplicity. Turn it on, turn it off, and have it equally balanced. I just wonder what you or other people think about that.
Well, technically, I mean, you can turn it on. But
error
if you
capture
turn it back off, you need to be sure that it was off to start with, because otherwise you may not be restoring things in their initial state.
That's because you're passing it because it's an attribute, because it's persistent across scripts. This says,
Well,
Josh, get a thumbs up.
So if I can just quickly share my screen, right, and bring that into display. So we're having a script. So what I'm doing here is I'm reading the state, okay, for both of these, and then I'm saying, okay, whatever it was, I don't care. I'm gonna set them, okay.
Sure.
So that is perfectly fine.
And then you're restoring them.
When it's time to restore, the restore happens if and only if it's needed. I wouldn't be able to take those 2 and put them like this, and say this I don't need, because if I do this, I'm now allowing user abort but maybe it was off to start with, you know.
Yeah, I see what you're doing.
So
Just, I think there's two different approaches. So I'm just putting it out there because I think it's interesting. It's often we'll just, we'll turn it on because it's sort of something that we explicitly want to do in the script. We want to turn our capture on because we want to turn it on. So we turn it on. And then we're done, we turn it off within the same script. So it's balanced. And then, any other calling scripts or scripts that are subsequently, we just do the same thing, make it very explicit. But anyway, I like that technique. It's interesting. Always good to have the tools in the toolbox.
yes, excellent. And again, for allow user abort, to me, it's pretty much a non-brainer because I can't. It's very difficult for me to think of a time where I want users to just press escape and the script exits out without me knowing where we're at and in a state that I have no control over. And for set error capture, that is more like for you to decide. But if you are not setting it to on and you have some scripting going on, the errors that will happen may or may not prompt the user with a native FileMaker error dialog. And maybe it is what you want, maybe it is not what you want. That's really up to you. Some people are big on failing quickly and failing loud. Some people are more like, well, I'm going to handle those things myself and put error trapping after every single line in my code. So yeah, there's some balance. Basically, there's no single answer for that type of stuff. But
yeah, I think you make a good point. I mean, there's two camps. I'm a little bit in the putting the error capture proximate to the things that I know. And if I don't know what's going to throw an error, I'll let it fail, as you say, noisily. And then I'll learn something. I was like, oh, I didn't know. Who knew that could throw an error? So I trap near where I know what I'm trapping. And the rest I'm like, I want to hear about it.
Okay, very good. Anyone else?
Robert, question. So, in an example where you have, so again, do you pessimistically write code? Or maybe that's another way to put it. So do you have error trapping on every single possible situation? Which, I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to set a field. Now the set field operation could fail. Do you put error trapping around that? You go to layout, obviously,
Yeah.
fail, you put error. Yeah.
So my answer to that is not at the set field level. Okay. But if I do something that creates a record, I test after I expect the record to be created. Was there an error? If I do something that deletes a record, same thing. If I try to gain a record lock on something, I try to error trap for that. But once I know my record's there and I'm able to write to it, then I don't do a validation after each and every script step. Basically, if there is something that fails a validation that is enforced by the schema, it's the commit that's going to fail. So again, after you commit, you want to have some form of error trapping. And if you want to have something where every set field is trapped and so on and so on, then I would say perhaps you want to turn to something like the new transaction scripting that's been released in, I'm going to say 19.6. No, I'm not even going to say because I don't remember what version number it was introduced in, but it was introduced in recently. It's funny because with transactions, you get more of the error capture, but at the same time, it's not like you're in full control. You know, there are some things that are going to go through, and the transaction is going to keep going. There are some things that are not going to get through, and you're going to get kicked out of your transaction, even though maybe you want to stay in there and do some other things. So there's a bit of give and take there, and you need to see what works best for you. But in scripting that does not involve the newer transaction script steps, I don't test after every set field. That's a bit too far to my taste, but I think I know some people who do exactly that. So, and I think some of them are on this call.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Did you see Sean's suggestion about getting?
I'm sorry, I didn't see anything that's in the chat. So if there's something there,
so he was suggesting get last error detail as a standard part of your capture. Was that already in there or no?
Yes. So basically, if we look at the custom function for error custom, so this is really what takes care of that.
I would add a little bit of a commentary to that, and that is when the transactions came out in my testing. If you're, and it probably even without a transaction, so you have two different kinds of validation that can happen. Validation that happens when the record is actually committed, and validation that happens as the field data is saved, or before you move to the next field, let's say. And some validations don't need for the record to get committed, like is it a number or is it empty, that kind of thing. Other validations, like unique, etc., do need to have the commit happen to get the the error to trigger that the validation failed, or that constraint failed, whatever.
Yes.
So get last error detail won't give you the right location, because you're now past the field that actually had the problem, because it's now a record problem. So you might have like the information saying the validation failed, which is great because it's tied to the commit, but really you want to know which of the fields was the one that actually failed the validation.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, you have to explain.
And that's one thing where basically running the script again, and when the time to commit comes, like make sure that you disable the error capture. At that point, FileMaker will come up with its native dialog for the commit failing, and you will get some more information about what makes the commit fail. Like, is it because like this field is mandatory and it's empty? Is it because this field is set to be unique and you do something where it ends up not being unique? But indeed, like you said, the script step failing is different, even though it's a set field in something completely separate that made it that provoked that. The commit is very far apart from where the set field happened, maybe after you've looped over different records or whatever, and then like you see, oh, something happened where I can't commit, so it gives you one level of information, but it doesn't really, you still have some investigation to do to be able to get to the source. So yeah, and I think the distinction when you say some do require the commit for you to see the error and some don't, I believe it depends on if for the validation FileMaker needs to rely on the index, because stuff that's not committed, isn't part of the index yet. So so stuff like unique and things like that, I think would only be able to be validated on the commit. Whereas if you say you have something where a field has a validation for a strict type to be number, and you input something else, that I would expect you would get the error right away without even having to get to the commit. So, and something also to speak a little bit about the like if you end up error checking after every set field or something like that, if you have something in your solution where you have scripting that handles like all of the CRUD operations for your tables into one location, and you channel everything through that, I mean, it can still be a fair bit of work to set it up, and some people try to automate that in their best way. But once it's done, you don't have to revisit it all that much. But if you have like countless touch points for something that will edit contact data, then yes, looking at, oh, in each of those places, I need to make sure that after every set field, I do an error check. It's not very tempting, but again, it's a risk reward type of thing. So you use it as much as you need it, and it fails on you, you know, basically as much as you have been reluctant on putting the error trapping in. So if you're not dealing with error much, maybe you're okay. But you know, it's just sometimes it's difficult to anticipate the type of changes that will happen to a solution. You know, maybe all of a sudden, you know, your solution gets a new privilege set and users in there, and they're constrained in some ways that your other users are not. And then things that have been running fine for years, all of a sudden, they start throwing errors to you. And if you're not trapping for them, you know, what happens next in your script can be disastrous. So they're just things to take into consideration. So that's security is one of the obvious examples, but there's other things, you know, like we said, if you have something that is set on multi-file, and then for one reason or another, you know, this other file that the system normally relies on that day, it's down, you know. So there's a lot of things to watch for, and it's why, you know, trying to handle the errors as much as we can is the best protection.
Yeah, I just want to highlight that point because I'm one of those weirdos who traps for just about everything, everything that can throw an error, I'll check for. And I've just, because it's, when you tie that in with really good logging, it makes it even really easy to go back and debug your scripts because you know exactly what line number everything happened on. I find myself rarely even opening a debugger anymore because I can just look at a log. But yeah, your point about the privilege sets, as things change over time and validation on fields changes, and you introduce new privilege sets that don't have access to a certain field, and maybe there's no accompanying validation, and now you discover months later that field has never gotten set by that set of users because you weren't checking for an error after trying to set it, or they don't have access to a certain script that was not properly error trapped. So yeah, it's a really good example. And it also kind of points out an interesting, I think it highlights that we get to make this decision. It highlights an interesting kind of, I don't want to use the word philosophical difference again, but you know, the new transaction script steps really catch everything CRUD related when you try to set a field, when you create a new record, when you delete a record. And the default for scripts before those came along, you know, Claris really put a lot of trust in developers to trap appropriately, and we're optimistic that we would be responsible for catching everything rather than a default sort of try-catch exception handling scheme like they've introduced with the transaction step. So yeah, we have a lot of power to capture stuff, but it's also quite tedious. So definitely an interesting trade-off.
There is a burden that's on us, that's for sure. And I think, to me, that's what makes it matter even more, that we need to have something in our toolkit that makes it less of a burden, you know. And if I need to have like 5 custom functions, I'm like, okay, fine. But if I need to have 15 custom functions, then I'm like, wait a second, I'm not going to rely on that, because it becomes just too much. At least to my taste. I don't know, like, what are barriers to adoption for some people when they look at other people's code. But in this case, I can say that trying to involve as few as possible, custom functions in the mix is really something that was tried by design, like intently trying to keep it down and not have something that is asking for a lot, asking where every time I do something, like I need to write some JSON set function call and so on, or make a let, and then in there have functions or raise the variables or everything. No, just let have it be streamlined. Let have it be almost identical every time we call on it. And if there's anything that needs to be different, then we rely on context data to make it different, but not have like different ways that it ends up being called, where I need to change the call signature that much.
Hey, Robert, you were pointing a moment ago at the object name doesn't exist, one of my personal favorites. And also you mentioned earlier failing early. I just want to expand on that. One of the things that we like to do a lot is check conditions at the beginning, commit the record in case there was, in case, well, actually, that's more complicated, but we have a script and we pass the object name in, and we use the script steps or functions rather to see if that object name exists. Did someone duplicate the portal that we want to go into? Anyway, I think that's a part of the whole picture. You mentioned it failing early, and so we always check that we've got all the object names. If we're going to traverse 3 portals in the script, we'll check it on lines 1, 2, and 3. Exaggerating a bit there.
Yeah, I'm not sure I was following all you said, but
well, let me apology for fast talking New Yorker. So if we have a script, let's just say, that's going to go into 3 different portals for whatever reason, and we're going to go into we're going to enter the portal using go to object name, or go to object rather, by object name. So at the top of the script, before we begin a script, which is going to change state or get halfway done, before we do anything, we'll check that the conditions are auspicious. Are we in the browse mode? Do we have a found set greater than 0? And then we have a routine that it's just a single script that we can call with a subscript that we can call with a single line, into which we pass the object name that we're expecting, because it has occurred that we'll have a portal that we'll typically name after the TO. And, maybe we did a little layout work and we duplicated the portal, and now we've got something that's, table name copy. But,
yes.
So we'll get that, and it'll throw up a message to the user and create a help ticket. So it's like, the overall concept is fail early. And the more we fail early, that's a whole section of code that gets moved up top and simplifies the. Anyway, that was slower. I talked slower for that.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. I think we have options. In case of, especially if you have things that are not packaged as transactions, then I see a really big benefit into failing early. If you have something that is packaged into a transaction, normally it shouldn't matter much if you fail a bit later. I mean, you're still going to be going through processing, and there's time consumption happening there. So it's like in your case where you mentioned, okay, we have 3 portals and we need to be doing stuff on each of them. Yeah, you could say, okay, I'll put all the checks at the beginning to make sure that I have all 3 portals on the layout, and then I'll carry on and go to each of them and do what I have to do in them. But with transactions, you know, if something goes bad, you can just say, okay, revert record, and then things are somewhat restored to at least on the data end of things to what they were before you started. If you navigated, then navigation won't be restored for you. You need to handle those things. But yeah, so as a concept, I don't think anyone can be against something where we're failing early in our scripts. I think it's a good thing to be aiming at.
I heard Josh mention really good error logging, which was not even covered in this because that wasn't part of the scope of the presentation, but that has me curious what people do for error logging.
Maybe someone can volunteer for one of the upcoming months and have a presentation on error logging. I think that's
Who would that be?
Feel eyes on me. I didn't invent any error logging myself. I've adopted the work of others. But I actually I'll just throw it in the chat if you guys are interested. There's a great error logging framework. It's a FileMaker solution, and you just kind of plug and play. You just import a couple scripts. You put one log solution on your server, and you kind of hook it up with all this error trapping the way you want. You would have sort of you have a log data function that wraps your error, or you append your error to a bit of log data, and then you can just shoot it on up to your log. And as long as you write good parsing code in your logger, then you can see all this stuff just displayed in really nice record format, and it's become searchable, and you can actually have logic in there that will respond to certain types of errors, like Robert was talking about. So certain errors might be really bad, and you want to get an email about them in the middle of the night, and maybe they're that bad. So
wow,
it's the type of stuff you can do with a really good log paired with a system like Robert's talking about.
Nice.
Yeah, I guess some people may be using like the pub/sub pattern, like simple queue, to achieve things like that, and perhaps yeah, I take that back. So yeah, simple queue could be a good way into relaying the information to other systems. And that can be plural, like we said, saying we insert something to the log, but we email something out or send some other type of notification. So yeah, but that gets into all of the type of stuff where we say, okay, is this information level? Is this a warning? Is this critical type stuff? So there's a whole lot of a different level altogether in terms of what this gets into.
I say Josh dropped a link to a GitHub repo, and so the log is a FileMaker. It appears to be a FileMaker database because it says log.fmp12, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
And there's some instructions inside the file if anyone wants to try throwing it on a test server or something. And I think the real magic happens when you take something like the errors, because there's actually some parsing logic, but I think it uses kind of an older let notation, which I think is a bit outdated now. I'd kind of lean more towards something like Robert just presented on, and rewrite parts of the log file to parse out errors from JSON instead. But Yeah,
I think it's safe to use JSON. 16 and above is pretty much a safe bet these days.
Yeah, hopefully.
Didn't used to be.
Yeah.
I would rely heavily on JSON, and of course, I mean, some people, they can feel like having a custom function that creates the variable on the fly, like obfuscates part of the code. But in this case, I'd say it's by design, you know, because otherwise you end up having something where each time you do something like this, you know, instead of just having that one test, you need to say, okay, I'm gonna set my variable, you know, error, and it's going to be, you know, whatever, you know, a custom function that does the JSON payload that writes the error, and then you need to test against it in the exit loop if, you know, is error my error, and so on and so on. So it just gets more verbose, so to speak. So I get that if you're not familiar with what the custom function does and the fact that it raises the variable for you on the fly, you can be taken aback just reading the script and being like, wait a second, how come, you know, we're reading from error when it's not declared anywhere above? Like once you say, okay, this is how it works and this is part of the pattern, you know, I feel like you can overcome those kind of obstacles.
Seeing we're talking about errors, I'll reiterate my kind of wish list thinking that I keep hounding Claris for many years now, but I wish we had some kind of debug level on the server that we could put the file, a particular file or a set of files, into this kind of state where we're saying we want, you know, every single step logged. So we want to analyze performance, right? So as every step runs, it measures the performance it takes for it to run. It measures and it tracks any logs, any errors on that step. And, you know, you turn it on to do this, and in the file, there would be some indication that this setting is on. And obviously it would make things slower, but that's the expectation, is that you can at least measure and find the problem spots, so to speak, right? So that's one level. The other level
all in one
is
place.
just like, you know, yeah, like it would be on, like right now, I hate the error log or the event log just because it's I don't know, it's I guess it's a mix of different things, and I guess what I'm after is a script error log or script.
Well, they just separated
log
out the script log.
and what's that?
And so in 20, I think they made it so you could
separated out
separate.
the script.
Yeah. So
Yeah, but I mean, I think it's not quite where I
happens,
wanted it. So
if you have something that happens client side, the server has no knowledge. Like the errors that happen client side don't get to hit the server ever.
Yeah.
You know, so if you are running something with a perform script on server, if you're running something with a schedule, if you call the script with an API call, then yes, it's going to run on the server, and as it comes across errors, those will get to the logs. But for everything that happens elsewhere, you need to basically write those out to logs and then try to retrieve those logs from all of the spokes you have on your network, and then say, okay, let's centralize that, and that's kind of a nightmare to to just get the full picture of, okay, this is everything that happened in one place. So.
Right. So yeah, thanks for reminding me, Robert, that the client errors are never logged anywhere, and that was kind of the emphasis to explain that to Claris, that we wanted this logging to be comprehensive to every single client. Go, Pro, and I don't remember where else, like WebDirect. I can't remember if it logs errors on WebDirect. I guess it does because the scripts are running on server, and I don't remember now if they run in the SASE process or not. But anyway, the point is that it would be completely comprehensive. It would, and then you would have different levels of it. So you could say, I want it to be, logging every single step. I want it to be logging only errors, or I only want it to log, a little bit higher up. So the other wish list I had was to log scripts. So every time a script is run, we can do this ourselves, but it would just be so great if it was built in and it had, the logic to know that the script was called and how long it took to run, excluding the time it takes for its subscripts, and only including the main script. So like it would figure all that out, and then you could correlate your scripts and see like which ones are the most critical scripts that get run the most, right? And all kinds of analytics that you could do on that. But
yes,
I
believe
you make changes too. What happened?
Yeah, I believe Hansa had a product that was in that space, but it was basically relying on the developer coding the calls in. I think it was relying on a plugin, and then the plugin would write to like this central repo of information. I don't know if it was a FileMaker table or a SQL table, but it was a bit of a warning saying, well, the more you use it, the more it's going to slow you down, but you're going to be easier for you to spot if you have, say, bottlenecks or like what's heavily used, what's not so heavily used, or what is it that you've decommissioned, but it turns out, hey, someone is still using it, So, yeah.
Yeah, I'll share one more story because I think it's relevant. In the past, we had some error logging custom function or script, and that script had error logging in all the places, including the script that did the error logging. So you can imagine where I'm going with this, which was the script that was logging the errors was itself getting errors. And so, we were just like baffled as to like, what the hell's going on? Why is this system so slow? And, and eventually, we tracked it down that, things were getting completely out of hand. But you really, you got to be careful with stuff like
it's like they've introduced recently something about audit logging, right? And you have to be careful not to step on your own toes with that stuff.
Yeah, that too. Yeah.
I'm going through the pain of pulling logs into FileMaker files, and deduping is such a headache. And would be really nice if we had a more elegant way of managing the data, because every time I only do this every couple of years when I'm auditing FileMaker file usage. But oh my God, it would be very nice if we had an alternative.
If we're mentioning wish list items, I want to jump back to one that Robert, you mentioned earlier. Dang, I would love get script line number just as a function, and would be fantastic, just for those business logic things, because just seeing the hoops you jump through there to establish a real FileMaker error, like divide by 0. It makes sense that that creates an error, but that's a quite hacky to have to do. It would, if
Absolutely.
something they already proved they can do, by giving us that error location. It would be great if we could just call that get line number.
Yes, yes, and even before the function was surfaced in FileMaker Pro for us to use, you know, there were flags that you could use to have that information be logged on your workstation, right? And on the server also. So it's not like the information isn't there and isn't available or something like that. It's just that the feature is not it's not really available to us.
So before I got the Monkey Bread plugin, I was doing my searches in scripts by printing it out and searching through the PDFs. And the nice thing about the PDF is that it would be more verbose than the actual script that you were looking at. And so you could find, like, you know, how the individual settings inside of a script step if you wanted to. And it would explode out other things, like, you know, like for imports and exports and all the fields that were being used. But the one thing it didn't have, even the PDF doesn't have the line numbers. So it makes it really hard to get back into a large script and find those things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, there's that. I mean, there's a bunch of things. I think a lot of that in other environments, you know, we said, hey, you have to watch for every single thing. And most of the time we hear about like try catch, you know, and that's a different pattern. The single pass loop is trying its best to mimic that with what we have in FileMaker. But try catch really would let us have a whole more piece about how errors are handled in our FileMaker scripts, or everything altogether. So
since you guys mentioned wish list, are those already ideas in the community that were posted? Like,
I believe so.
Oh.
I believe so. I'm sure.
If anybody has links to those,
like Vince said, you know, he's been pouncing to try and get errors to be centralized and more logging in it and everything.
Yeah,
because
I think I voted on those ones.
You know, there's a lot of analysis that can be done there. And I mean, just if you were to pair something like that with the DDR, you know, there's a lot of valuable information that can be got there. So I totally understand Vince's interest for something like that. And for just about every other request, I'm sure, like line numbers or try catch or all of that. I don't think awareness is the issue. It's just like there's so much that can be done. You know, there's only 24 hours in any given day, so yeah. But in time, we're getting new releases, and all of them have some new feature for us to use.
Here's my feature request. Get script stack would be nice. You can pass the stack around, but it would be nice to just be able to say what is the stack at this time. We take our errors and we pipe them out to a system that we call help request, which is essentially what other people call log, and you know, it goes into a FileMaker database. We're using, I think, very similar or identical to what Robert was doing. Since we historically haven't had line number, we just add an additional string that sort of is searchable. We have the monkey bread, so if we know the script and we know the string that got passed along with the error package, the JSON package of you know, get file, get script name, get script ID, we just pass a string, and that's what we use for line numbers, which can move if you delete lines. But FileMaker is an awesome platform. We're being recorded, right?
Yep. We're still being recorded, unless
I know that was a
Eric,
joke.
you
I
want to
like
end
it.
the recording at this point, or?
Huh?
Yeah. I just made a joke about something.
Okay. Well, I was going to say that going
all been
back to the
positive
try
so far.
catch thing. What's that?
I said it's all been positive so far. So.
Yeah. So try catch. I think you know, when I was explained it, was that try catch is very different than transactions, and so it might be that we'll even get that construct at some point. But anyway, it's a different animal. So, but yeah, well, lots of good ideas.
And Tony,
So
that link that I put there for the that community idea, is that the one you're talking about? The call stack, get call stack. Oh wow, it's got like 1.3 thousand votes.
and I think I've
Tony,
put into the
you.
chats something like a link for anyone who wants to download the file again. I don't know if I know I've shown it on screen, you know.
I posted it too a couple times.
Okay, awesome. So
Thank you. I downloaded. Look at it later. Concentrating. Yeah, passing the script. Eric, if that's passing the script stack, I think that's a good feature. I want to actually, Vince said something that I want to kind of throw, I don't know, riff off. So Vince, your earlier first request you made sounded like you're always wanting to track performance very, very vigorously, right? Was that, did I understand what you were saying? Your first request was about performance tracking?
I mean, different uses of that script error, script log. One of the uses could surface, you know, performance errors, you know, issues to look at, right? So, yes, performance analysis.
And
I mean,
also, so go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say that one of the other longstanding requests, and then that we asked Keith, or I asked Keith, for, you know, many times, was why can't we get, you know, like Safari debug log, but a FileMaker version. So you open up a window to look at a layout, and you can see all the objects that are loading on the layout, how long they take, you know, because things that are happening on the layout now happen in different threads. It's no longer like, you know, loading, waiting for the layout to render, to like waiting for all the objects on the layout to be rendered before it loads, like it displays the layout. There's a lot of things on the layout that happen in different threads. Portals, web viewers, I guess, whatever. I don't know all the things, but, and so having some kind of tool like Safari debug could show you, like, oh, you know, like it took 4 seconds to load this portal. What the hell's going on there? You open it up and you look at all the objects in the portal. Then you see a field that took like 3.9 seconds, and you'll click on that, and then you see, like, oh, there's a value list on that field that took 3.5 seconds to load. Well, that just drives the whole point home that, like, you can find the issues so quickly. It's sometimes so frustrating to debug issues where you just get a constant stupid beach ball for a long time, and you're wondering what the hell is going on? What is it doing? And you have no information as to what it's doing. You know, at that point, you know, what do? Reach for a log? I don't know. What do people do?
I think right now, sorry.
Well, that just gets compounded because they just added another, what was it, the layout calculation field now? You've seen that, right?
Yeah, they have layout calculation.
Yeah. So
yeah. Honda's big push lately is, Honda's big push lately is he wants to convince Clay to optimize the calculation engine, and he has ideas on the way he could do it to make it 10 times faster, even 100 times faster. But
Wow.
I mean, there's a lot of calculations happening on layouts.
Yeah, it's tricky because the second you start touching that, it's not like we can't say, oh, it just, in terms of scope, the footprint of calculations in FileMaker, it's everywhere. So like if you start making any changes, you need to make sure that all of it is for the better, and it's risky business, So I understand how they may be reluctant to get in there.
Well, I don't know what the future is for FileMaker, but from what Clay said once, which really stuck in my mind, is that, I mean, they could improve performance if they got rid of side effects. And I don't know if anybody knows what side effects are, but the way they were explained to me is like the fact that you can have a let statement declare a variable that could have some impact on a script that's running, right? So you have this side effect of the variable being declared in an area where it could bleed over into another area, right? So the fact that they have these side effects prevents them from doing some real performance tuning, and I don't know the inner workings of that, but like if they got rid of that, and I'd say like, okay, if I was like, if we had the option to say, I want to use a system that's really fast, and I'm willing to give up my let functions, or what is it when you write code and you say evaluate, right? So you give up my evaluate functions and my let functions, and then I get like really fast performance. I would probably say, sure, give it to me, But anyway, I don't think it's ever going to happen.
I mean, they've got a whole lot of backward compatibility stuff, and it's part of their North Stars. So if they were to go in that direction, they'd need to do some changes that are pretty intense, in the range of perhaps changing the file extension or things like that. Not that they didn't do that recently, because they pretty much came up with a file extension for the Claris platform files, but it still would be something, and then they need to try and do something that would convert the stuff to the best ability, kind of the way in between the FP5 and FP7 files, there was some type of conversion, because, we used to have the sort scripts that were not going to the first record or something like that. And then each of your script that had a sort script step in there, after the conversion, it would have the sort plus the go to first record, or I don't recall the exact conversion, but there was something, the code was being altered as you went through the conversion. So yeah, I'm sure they've learned a lot from all of that, and I guess there's some good reasons for them not wanting to open that box again.
So Vince, I like the ideas, and I think I understand them. Right now, we're sort of depending on knowledge of what's fast a little bit more, perhaps, and then I guess this top call. The other thing, the idea of like if you have a script and you're not trapping errors, it would be good to get that programmatically written out, because the user doesn't always tell you, like, oh, I saw this dialogue. So as I said earlier, I don't always trap everything because I want things to surface and be noisy. But you can't, I mean, that said, you can't always rely on the user to tell you what happened. So those sound like good suggestions to me. Along with get script stack.
Oh, we're at
While
2
they're at
hours.
it, get doc size and doc position. As long as you're in the get, as long as you add and get functions, get doc would make some of my code simpler.
We're at 2 hours now. I'm not kicking anybody out or anything like that, just letting everybody know. So it's been a good discussion.
I think Josh was the person talking about the error logs. Is that correct? Is Josh still here?
Yeah, he's there.
I was just going to say, Josh, you're welcome to present next month if this dovetails, like it's a good subject to dovetail on. So like I'm making an invitation for you if you're interested and you have time. I think it would be a great topic.
Yeah, sure. I'll take the information. I'm staring down the barrel of a pretty nasty deadline for some work stuff, so I don't know that I would have time for the next
Either that, or you could nominate somebody else who.
Yeah, maybe I could get the guy himself who wrote that to present. But yeah, I'll take the information for sure, and I agree it's a really interesting topic and one I care a lot about. So, and I think it links up with errors. I think they really go hand in hand in my experience. So, I agree.
Yeah. I think just I guess because, I don't know, maybe I have this disposition, and I grew up with a mom who never threw anything away. I tend to be very minimalistic. I try to be, at least. Now that I have kids, I can't do that anymore. But anyway, it's so sometimes I think, what's the most I can remove, like, and transactions was great because I really gravitated to this idea that I'll let the transaction tell me if it has any errors, the validation errors or data entry errors. And then that made the scripting, I guess, how would you say, the clarity of the script was almost like self-documenting. Like if someone were to look at a script, oh, I see you're creating a record, you're setting a bunch of fields, you're, navigating to this other area and you're doing some other work there, and then you're done, right? As opposed to like having the script have inflated error trapping for all kinds of things, which I'm not arguing like negatively about it. I'm just saying that it just helps with the clarity of the script. And that's why I also wanted to advocate strongly for the use of some kind of script log that then we could just turn on and just
Right.
and then just turn it on and look and see if we have any errors, right? If we don't get any errors, and again, test-driven development ties into this, which is run a bunch of tests, you don't see any errors, okay, everything looks good, I mean, but that's, all those things are very far from reach. All right.
Vince, there's just one thing I'd like to share on my screen, and like that's the kind of stuff that is going to be perhaps suitable for a different presentation and topic and everything, but it's into like the kind of automations that people can leverage if they have patterns that are that are a bit of a burden to do by hand, So I'm just going to share my screen because you gave an example, are you testing after every set field? And like I said, I'm not doing that, okay? But if someone wanted to do this, okay, there's different tools that you can leverage to get there. Okay, so basically anything that we write into scripts, like we can get to the clipboard and there's XML underneath. Okay, and I'm sure you're well aware of that because you're parsing all that stuff when you get the DDR, although the clipboard format can be different from what we have, but if I was to simply take those 2 steps here, okay, and put them to my clipboard, okay, and then over here I have something that is called raycast, okay, and I'm using it to leverage some Apple scripting that was done, I'm going to say by, oh, Josh, can you help me?
Yeah, Dan Shockley.
Dan Shockley, thank you. So I could say, okay, I want to take that FM clip objects and do just get the XML from it, okay? And then you can get in here and then paste the content and we have the XML, okay? And I know what I would like to inject in between each of them, okay, is something that does my exit loop if with error last, like this with, I don't know, set field failed, okay? So I can copy that, ask again to get my XML from it, okay? Yeah, the first one, okay? Say, I put this in here. So basically this here is what I want to have, inserted after each of my fields, okay? So I could say, okay, this is marking each of my fields. Okay, so if I copy that and I say, let's find that, knowing that I want to replace it, okay, I want to replace it with things that will be defined in here, not losing it. I'm not wiping it out and putting something new. But then you can say, okay, let's have this in there. And then you perform that replace all. And then you say, okay, I'm going to take all that text. I'm going to copy my XML and say, okay, I want the XML to be FileMaker stuff now. And you can come in here and say paste. And now you have the exit field, exit loop if after each of your things. So, and again, here I had just 2, but if I had 30 of them, it would have done the substitution just the same, okay? So, and again, if I had wanted to have something somewhat custom to each, I could have inserted it. It's just, it becomes hard to do something that is custom. You'd have to say, hey, try and look for something that is from the step before and say, okay, it's this field that failed or something like that. But you could strip those things in FileMaker. Over here, I'm just doing a text substitution in a BB edit document, but those things are within reach, so the more tooling you have for things like that, again, it's just about lowering the friction because you say, maybe I'd like to do this thing, but it costs too much for me to do it because I'm going to spend so much time doing it, So if you say, okay, well, there's a way for you to get there and spending less time, then perhaps you're going to say, okay, well, now I can do it, It doesn't make it more readable, So that's the other thing. So I'm not saying it's perfect in every way, but I'm simply saying we have options and not all of them are strictly within the script workspace that we have, you know. So, and that's it.
Yep.
Yeah, Robert, riffing off what you just showed there. One thing, script step open record request or whatever is a good thing. If one of the things that could go wrong with a bunch of set scripts is someone might have the record open. So in a multi-user situation, sometimes we'll, you know, just, hey, get a record lock with the open record request thing. That's kind of bread and butter sometimes. The other thing, the set field, we don't do it, but you could do it with a set field subroutine where you pass in the field that you're trying to set, and the data you're setting it to, and then you have the set field subscript, you know, contain error trapping, such that if there's a validation on an individual field, as people were talking about earlier, you error out at that point. So in other words, one line versus, you know, it's just one line. So if you're setting 6, it's 6 lines. It's a little bit opaque because you're, you know, going into a subroutine, but if the subroutine is rock solid, you know, kind of like battle tested code, I thought of doing it, but we just set field, and most of the time it works.
Yeah, it's a bit of what I was alluding to when I said, if you have something where in your system, like all the CRUD operations are pretty centralized into some scripts, well, you do it once, and then it's a set it and forget it type thing, you know.
Yeah, and you could do it. You could either do it with, you know, a bundle of JSON where you're passing like a bunch of fields, or you could do it line by line by line by line. And some, you know, people earlier made a good point about what if the validations change, or the unique was, I think, a pretty terrific example of something that you can't really easily check that in a script, you know, without checking the entire database. So anyway, pretty cool, interesting stuff.
It's all about making sure that we get to trust what happens when the code runs, you know, and part of it is readability, part of it is making sure that, you know, when things go bad, we're not caught off guard, and yeah, it all plays a role into that stuff.
Yeah, I guess you know, again, this was a long time ago for me when I lived in Arizona, but I took a class at ASU. I took a Java programming class, and I remember the teacher saying, "Okay, you can debug your program now," and you put it in debug mode or something. And it's been a long time, so I don't know how much of that has changed. But basically, you wouldn't change anything about your code, right? So you just put it in debug mode, and what it would do is it would log every single statement and tell you, like, it took this long, there were no errors, you know, and you'd see the results of every single statement. And that's kind of like what I'm after, so that, you know, again, we wouldn't inflate code with additional code. We would just have code stated explicitly, and so you could actually read it and grok it immediately, like, oh yeah, I get it, you know, like it's like the early days of people learning about FileMaker, and it's like, well, to generate this report, you know, you go to this layout, you search for these records, and when you know the steps, and then you can replicate them as a script, you've just written your first script. But it's all been very procedural. So, and that's what was easy for people to learn, is that, okay, I just repeat these steps, but I write them in the script. And so I think that was really, really easy for people to learn. But then, you know, with all this additional stuff, you kind of lose the essence of what, or I wouldn't say lose, but, you know, it gets a little bit harder to see the essence of the script, is what I'm saying. And I really wish that they would consider, you know, like, they obviously use tools like Xcode and whatever other compilers and things, and they have professional tools, I'm sure, to tell them like exactly what the code is doing and where and how, and I wish they would use that inspiration to infuse some magic into giving developers a better way to look at their code and understand what's going on. So that's my rant.
Very well.
Robert?
Yes.
Do you have a link for that FM clip? Oh, no, yeah, I see. Well, someone posted something. I don't think that's it, though. That raycast wasn't a raycast extension you were using there?
Yes. So just give me a second, because I don't think raycast extensions have, I mean, perhaps they have a web page, but you can only roll them out through raycast. So basically, there is a raycast extension for FileMaker that is Claris snippets. Okay, but what I was using was not that. It was really raycast native script commands, and basically I've got the Apple script file or bash script file on my drive, and raycast let me just call on that from the keyboard. So if you want to just connect with me, I can make sure that we go over that type of setup together and get you going on something like that.
Okay, so it's
I'll add to that.
just an Apple script that you're calling?
I'm not familiar with the. I just dropped a link to the FM clip tools. I'm not a user of Raycast, so that would be Robert can help you with that. Correct me if I'm wrong, Robert. The Apple scripts that are being called are coming from Dan Shockley's package of tools that I believe he's got on the GitHub repo that I just dropped a link to, called FM clip tools, which
That's
basically
correct.
read and write. They crack and let's see, they unpack and pack the clipboard with a collection of Apple scripts that Robert is combining them with Raycast, as best I can tell.
Yes. So basically, I can do a quick screen share, but like I said, it's Sean, right? If there's anything there that piecing it together is not necessarily obvious, feel free to reach out and we'll do something together where we can be sure that you're set up. So in Raycast, okay, you can define, okay, I have script commands, okay, and you can add directories. So I have a directory for FM clip, and in there, you just put the scripts that need to be in there. I think there is some sensitivity to like the file encoding and things like that. But like we said, like this is the Apple script that is going to be taking XML and translating it to FileMaker objects, and this is the one that does the opposite. And I have a couple other things in there, to make sure that they get shown when I'm calling them with the Claris logo. But yeah, that's really all it is. And the extension for Claris snippets. So it's really called Claris snippets. So if you do like install from store and you search for Claris snippets, then you're going to get it's Eric. I don't know if it's Luce or Luce, but he's the developer for that one thing, and it lets you do some other nice things. You can have basically keep clipboard copies of things you want to roll out easily into your code. It can do some smart substitutions for you, like you get a form prompt and say, okay, how do you want to substitute this tag in your XML to something else, and then have something be fed in there for you. So like I said, I'm hoping this gives you a little bit to look into and to say, okay, we can roll this out. But if there's anything about that setup that is not all that easy to replicate, just get in touch and we'll make sure that you've got everything it takes.
Oh, that helps a lot. Thanks.
I have a quick question for everyone. If I have a script running on a script schedule, is there any get parameter that I can ask to tell me that it is a script scheduled script rather than a user invoked script? Can I get the application version or application and it tells me that it's a SASE process? I don't remember is that possible?
I'm sure there is a get function that you can get that will tell you that it's running server side. Now, are you going to be able to differentiate between server side being triggered by perform script on server versus something running by a schedule or something
on the schedule?
Like that
yeah,
would have been called.
That's what I want to. Yeah, that's what.
Yeah, so that I guess is harder. You get to know it after the fact in the logs. Perhaps you could ask the API when it's running, the FMS admin API, hey, tell me, is this running? And in what session, but that seems like a strange round trip to call the FMS admin API from within the script you're running to know, hey, am I running within a schedule or am I running from something else that also is server side? So I'd have to look into the get functions and their nuances to know the answer to that.
Could call it as a subroutine. So Vince, here's my 2 cents. It's script schedule, the one that is in the, you configure in the server. It says, run me at 2 a.m., let's say. And at 2 a.m., you run one or perhaps multiple scripts and pass in a parameter. And it's not a get function, but that would give you some indication that it was called from, that'd be a way of tagging it.
Yes, that's a very good point.
See. Right, you write the parameter. You write a parameter.
If you call it from,
yeah.
And as long as you don't, as long as you don't, go onto a desktop client and run the script that's supposed to be only run from the server.
No, but the server schedule lets you define as part of the call a parameter, so you can have something that is exclusive to the schedule call.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. I said, I'm just saying, then don't call that from the client, because then you defeat the purpose.
I mean, with the same parameter.
Don't pass in that parameter from the client. Don't pass. No, sorry.
Can you create a count for the scheduler? Because when someone does a perform script on servers, the user account of the user, not the system, and then anything on the scheduler could have a different user account.
That actually sounds like
it, I guess. Yeah.
Server, because the server runs from a different account. That's a good point.
Yeah.
Well, and that's a get function too.
Exactly.
And Vince, what's your use case behind that? What makes it so you want to distinguish between PSOS versus schedule?
Because it's related to how we're kicking off something to run for inspector. because we can have it scheduled and we can have it manually invoked, and there'll be other methods as well. So we want to have a distinction between all of them.
I see.
Because it runs, even the manually invoked one is running on the server. The scheduled one is also running on the server. So I want a way to distinguish between the manually invoked one and the scheduled one. So, but I think I have a couple of options now. So cool. Thank you so much. I forgot that we had parameters. Yeah.
I mean, the separate account, that seems like a clean way to do it. As long as you don't log in using that account on a desktop. So like you said, Vince, you got a couple ways to win.
Yeah.
Is that radio silence I hear?
Oh, I mean, I'm not trying to set any length duration record, but I'm looking.
Yeah, we got a long way to go if you want to set that record.
Well, on the WebEx that I'm on, it reads 322. I guess I joined before some of other folks, but it still is getting into the lengthier than expected kind of zone.
Yep. Well, I guess definitely thank you for jumping in. Kind of short notice, Robert. Really appreciate it, and thank you for sharing your experience with this subject and your time.
Well, thank you for having me. I think it's a great topic, and we saw that people have quite a bit to say. So the more the better, I think. We need to make sure that people get to adopt some form of error trapping and try to turn the dial a bit up a couple notches, because it's not fun when something bites you hard.
C'est bien, Robert.
Yeah, in Rome, I what's that?
I'm just saying merci to Robert.
What, Beatrice, what language was that? Was that French or Italian?
I have so little opportunity to speak French that it's a pleasure to speak it to Robert.
Oui. Merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup, Béatrice.
De rien, monsieur.
You were going to say something about Rome?
Yeah, I was going to say something about Rome. I got a chance to listen to some parts of it, and Hansa had I guess if you get a chance to listen to Hansa's recent presentations that he's doing, it was a great topic. He shared both, I guess, celebrated moments and horrifying moments. So things that he would like to forget, and very kind of, sharing in these mistakes that we make, and then we come to learn from our mistakes. But was really great to hear, that how the mistake came about, how they what they course corrected and did differently from that point on. So it was a really great talk. I really liked it.
It's got a bit of a Halloween special twist to it.
Vince, it's a record. I heard you earlier say you weren't there, so I'm guessing you saw a recording.
No, they streamed it.
Oh, streamed
I
it.
tuned
Okay.
into the stream.
Do you know, are they going
Live
to
streamed it.
are they going to drop recordings, down the road? Or we don't know.
It was a paid.
They
Or it's
said
paid.
2
Okay.
weeks.
Okay, I'll keep my eyes out for it.
They said 2 weeks from now. Yeah, but I don't know if you have to pay for the recordings as well. Robert, do you know
We'll
if
see.
you have to pay for the recordings?
That's my understanding, because otherwise it would have decreased the likeliness of someone to pay for the live stream if you just had to wait. You know, I get that the live stream you were able to do things like was it WhatsApp or something like that that would let you interact live with the people over there. But all in all, I think like the way it was priced, I hardly see how they would say, okay, 2 weeks after the event, it's going to be released to the general public for free. But
you maybe drop it 6 months later, so it's paid, which is legit. I gotta go get me some lira.
Or we just got to get ourselves Hansa. We just have to get Hansa again.
I think that's Kroner's.
Yeah,
you get him on.
So horrible time zone for him. At
We've
4 in the
done
morning.
it before.
Yeah.
He can do it every couple years.
Yeah.
Well, on their side, it looks like they had fun. I hope the food was okay.
That room looks like
if,
a motel room, Vince. Is that you in a hotel?
Yeah, I'm in my hotel room now.
Yeah, I wasn't here last month, but like, were the Engage announcements out when you guys were meeting last month?
Yeah.
Engage announcements? Yeah, I believe they were already out.
There might have been.
But I think registration was not out.
Oh.
Yeah.
So what was it that was not out?
The registration wasn't out yet. I think the registration just happened like a week ago or something.
Yeah, during Pause Georgia, they just announced it, which was a few days ago.
Yeah, I think that, and they also have been asking for speaker proposals.
Yeah, finally.
So, people planning to be there in February? Vincent, yeah.
I am.
Yes, I'll be there.
Awesome.
Tony, are you going to go?
I'm a little bit up in the air because I've got a tremendous amount of stuff going on here in New York City. So I have to give an honest answer. I'm thinking about it.
Yeah.
But I've got like 3 jobs right now.
It's different. The fact that it's in February instead of a summer month, you know, it's not the same schedule like what we're accustomed to. So I guess to some it will open up opportunities, and for some others it will make it harder to for them to go.
I'm kind of
working on my taxes in February.
I'm in the same position, Tony. I have an initiative which may or may not come to closure in time for considering it, but by that time registration may be closed. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm actually the president of the condominium here. Gosh, that's a lot of work. Anyway, crazy days.
So the intake for theoretically the limit for that DevCon or that Engage is 600. I don't know whether that's NDA, but they will expand it if they need to, but they've had quite a few pre-registrations. So I think I'm kind of hoping that they'll make my mind up for me, and won't be anymore. Yeah, won't be available registrations by the time I can say, yeah, I can definitely.
Did they cap the event? Is that? I really have been so busy. I've had a hard time just kind of waking up in the morning and getting through the day. Are they capping the total attendance at 600?
I think that might be under NDA. Anyway, that was part of our. Hey, Tony, you should get part of the MVP program, so you get in this inner bump.
Then I'd have 4 jobs.
Yeah. So, yeah. So it very limited.
Why not? Let's go for 5. Out the window.
Yeah.
But Beatrice, you might be right. And by the way, nice to see you. I haven't seen you on one of these meetings.
Yeah, nice to see you too, Tony.
So what'd you have for dinner? Never mind.
Oh no, I'm dying to tell you. I had tortiglione con le pomodori e melanzane.
Bueno.
And Vince might be able to translate. So pomodori e melanzane. It's
Bellissimo.
Yeah.
All right, I'm out of Italian.
Melanzane.
so it's tomatoes.
Melanzane. Pomodoro con melanzane. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's tomatoes cooked with eggplant, and the way I do it with copious amounts of red wine and served with toglioni, which is a fat kind of rigatoni.
That sounds nice.
You have to invite us next time.
Oh, I have to say, so this is like the 5th time I made it, so it was good. And eggplant isn't seasoned in Ontario, so it's all good.
Yeah. Any possible plans for an in-person event in Toronto or somewhere close by?
Norbert, we are so disorganized in Toronto. It's just, it's compared to Montreal, we just, except when Fabrice and we organized that great 2 days, and it was absolutely fantastic, and it was wonderful. And since then, there hasn't been anything like that. And how long ago was that? 10 years ago or something?
Yeah, it's been quite some time. I guess they were coming by Montreal on the same trip.
Yeah,
so,
they came to Toronto, and then I drove them to Montreal. And Fabrice, because I had to make it in 7 hours, Fabrice was holding on to the door guard the whole time, and was being made fun of by Jan was making fun of him the whole time.
That is fun to know. Yeah, so it's just, I was curious because from SOFA, I felt like there was a fair bit of people in that space, and that it would make it possible for a local event to take place, and perhaps there could be people from south of the border where it wouldn't be all that far, for them to.
Yeah. I think you mentioned that before, did you not, to Doug? But yeah, so Doug is the convener of the SOFA, but he tends to convene when Claris is saying, well, there should be partners meetings, and then they invite Doug to do his part as a platinum member.
Yeah.
But it tends
I'm floating that idea to Doug and to Charles, basically.
Yeah, so if Charles was behind it, he would get behind Doug, and it would probably happen because Charles always has a lot to say about what he can offer. So that would be a promising way of doing it, and it would be very, very lovely if it happened. Yeah.
Awesome.
Anyway, I'm going to leave you guys. I have my reading to do.
Hey, Beatrice, what kind of presentations do you give?
Me?
You thought you were out the door. You almost made it. Never mind. Yeah, what kind of presentations do you give? Never mind. I'll shut up now.
You are so cute, Tony. My last 2 presentations at DevCon have been on here's the short version. The short version is how you can totally screw up if you don't take business rules really seriously, and prototyping and user testing. Yeah, because I take user testing really seriously, and I also am totally into prototyping and the last one was because I had finally finished, or was it my final training for my project management professional certification, which was all about how do you know that you have delivered a quality solution? Because have you measured it? And do the people who you have delivered this to actually agreed that you have given them what they wanted and will sign off on the fact that, yes, all the deliverables have been met? And when I was doing that in project management training, this is such a non-trivial thing. Oh my God. Just to get the metrics, because you need metrics. You need them to say yes and no to a whole bunch of things. Yeah. But anyway, so
I guess.
So that's what I've given my last two presentations on.
I guess Beatrice, I guess the metrics would be easy if you're basing it on something that you currently have and you're improving it. But when you're creating something from scratch,
yeah, we're talking.
What are the metrics?
So the metrics are: what did they say they wanted? How did I break this down? How do I know that we both agree that this was something that they have in their hands? And then you develop a survey for satisfaction, which is obviously dead easy. But it takes a bit of thought. I don't think it's complicated, but it certainly takes a lot of thought. Yeah.
Well, user testing. My boss would love you. You taught me about user testing.
I think. Well, I align user testing with prototyping, and testing the prototypes, and then seeing. The only innovation I can think that I introduced into this was at the end saying, does the prototype that you approved conform to the solution that you have in your hands? And they may have second thoughts about that, but they may say, well, this is an improvement over the prototype. You know, I'm glad we have this rather than a prototype. You know? I'm going to sign off now.
Okay. All right.
Really delightful seeing you.
Bye,
Yeah, take care, guys.
Bye.